to quickly introduce Arko, and actually I don't even know where to start. Inspirational speaker, author, entrepreneur, investor. Arko, have I left out anything else that your fun things you are doing?
I'm a family man.
And a friend. And a friend.
Of course. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Very important. Yeah. That's
Arko,
nice to be here and good to see you all. So a long time ago. So yeah.
So Arko is also a dear friend of a lot of us here. He's been to India several times. Coming back on a formal note of introduction, Arko is based out of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. He was one of the earliest internet entrepreneurs in Europe. So he founded Eurotel. This was a couple of decades back. And one thing that sets him apart is he's extremely passionate about entrepreneurship. I was looking up his profile, and his stated mission is to make Netherlands the most entrepreneurial country in the world. And he also believes that entrepreneurship can save the world from a lot of its problems currently. Very passionate about the concept of self-management as well. Works very closely with startups. Even now, I'm hoping Arko will expand a little on the cool things he's doing about sustainable energy, etc. In the clean tech field. Now, he works very closely with startups, and that's why we invited him over to talk about, the trends he's seeing that is shaping the future of work, right? So he's been working with startups for more than a couple of decades, him being himself an entrepreneur. So we thought it will be interesting for him to come and share with us, what kind of trends is he seeing in the, in the startup ecosystem. And today's session will be an hour and a half, 1 hour and 30 minutes long. I'm going to invite my colleague Harini to host Arko in a way, and this is more a conversation. Harini, over to you.
Thank you so much and welcome once again, Arko. And obviously, I got curious when Rajesh said Arko is going to talk about the cool things that he does, because more than the description that he gave, the string of activities that you do, we're definitely curious to know what is the cool thing that you're doing right now in the sustainable energy space. So can we get started with that?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me in this meeting, and good to see you all. What's cool? I always try to spend my time with cool things, because life is too short to spend your time on things that don't matter. Sorry, I have to switch to English again. I was in a deep meeting in Dutch, of course, right before you, so my brain has to get used to the English. And what I do now, I decided 2 years ago to spend my time more on bringing society further, because the reason I'm passionate to work with Ricardo Semler with the Semco Style Institute is that I really believe that this leadership style will make the world better. And I'm 100% convinced that the more democratic leadership style will lead to more integrity on the work floor, with better decisions, with decisions that not only make companies financially healthy, but also make the environment literally more healthy, with more healthy people, less work pressure, but also with better care for our environment, the climate warming, these sort of things. But I really thought, well, I could do one step further than Semco Style even, and I could really start working for society. So I'm now director of the strategic board of the area where I live in. In Holland, we have in all areas economic and strategic boards. That's our entrepreneurs, governments, and educational institutes working together to make the world a better place. And we are called, our brand name is Clean Tech Area, and or Clean Tech Phil, as Jess said. And that means that we want to do it with a focus on the energy transition and on circular economy. And that's what I do. So I try to stimulate entrepreneurship. We're building an investment fund now for investment in society. We try to make the farmers part of the solution, by using waste from the agricultural sector to make biogas. We try to bring hydrogen to the Netherlands. We have the first 100% sustainable hydrogen plant already built. And these sort of things I'm doing now. And it all is about entrepreneurship and craftsmanship. So it's using talents of people. Irene, I think I told you a few years ago when we met that I'm 100% convinced that all solutions, all ideas, all inventions to make the world a better place are already there. We just have to get rid of the old business models and all the leadership behavior. If we change these sort of things, then we can use all these ideas, all these talents, all these people with great inventions to bring the world further. And now I'm even more convinced that in the area 30 kilometers around my house, all the inventions, all the knowledge is already there. And I'm also sure that it's also in Bangalore the case, it's there. We just have to see it, and we have to take away the hurdles so these ideas can flourish. And I found out that the Semco style, so the democratic way of working, is the best way of bringing these ideas above the surface. So that's what I do.
This is interesting. I definitely remember this when you said this, when we met the first time 3 years ago, that the business models have to be changed and solutions to all the problems are there. And you've been solving problems over 3 decades. You're such a passionate entrepreneur. You're passionate about entrepreneurship as a spirit, and you're developing so many organizations, mentoring so many startups, working closely. You must have definitely noticed a change in the way the workplace is, how it was. Let's talk about the workplace first, and then we'll come to the people aspect. What are the changes that you've noticed over 3 decades? How has the workplace changed?
Well, of course, because of COVID-19, we had to change the workplace because we all had to work from home. But the beauty is that in 1999, so that's 22 years ago, I founded a company called Genby. And the company was not a success, to be very honest. Actually, it was my biggest failure ever. But the idea we had was quite brilliant. We invented YouTube and Netflix 6 years before YouTube and Netflix. So we really thought, well, people will watch television series that are not being interrupted by advertisements, and they are really prepared to pay $10 per month for it, and which is Netflix. And we said, well, people will watch their own videos of each other instead of watching television, which is YouTube. It's totally clear. So we built it, but we were way too early. Broadband was not general accepted yet, and not even available. Browsers were not ready for video yet in 1999. It was very slow at the time. But we had a whole philosophy how internet would change the world. And we also thought, well, internet will help people working from home. You don't need an office anymore. And I found on my ceiling, we were cleaning the ceiling a few months ago. I found an old videotape in which we made a documentary of Genby, the company we founded. And our office was a clubhouse. People were working everywhere, but we only used our office as a clubhouse. So we were meeting each other, we were getting inspired. And we really were convinced that would be the future of work. Meeting each other to get inspiration and to share knowledge, share ideas, and to bring people together. And the work, as knowledge workers, you can work anywhere. And so that's how we built our office. And so we saw that already in 1999, and now it's happening. People work more from home, and that will stay, I'm convinced, because it's more productive for many people. But what we do see is that managers have problems with that, because managers think, oh, wait a minute, these people are working from home. I can't see if they are working hard enough. I want to control them. And that's really weird, because the people don't have any problem, but the managers do have. And all figures show that people are more productive when they work from home and can use their own skills to form their own agenda, to set priorities themselves. They don't need the manager. The manager is there. Well, I think actually the manager is an endangered species, to be honest. It's about to disappear. But, people can make their own decisions. And specifically if you put them in teams, and I don't mean the software, but I mean the groups of people working together, they can make better decisions than most of the managers, as long as they have the same information. And I think the COVID-19 crisis is a turbo on the trend. So I'm convinced that it will stay. But we predicted it 20 years ago already.
That's interesting. A look forward into the future 20 years ago is fascinating, and obviously it is proven that you're absolutely convinced, and you're here looking at it today. But in the context of self-managed organizations, where you're saying that the manager is an endangered species and almost extinct now, it's kind of sometimes unsettling for people who are managers to listen to this statement when you call them as an endangered species, almost extinct. But it obviously means that something has happened to the role of managers. They're still there. What do managers do, or what are they expected to do in a self-managed business or in self-managed teams? If you have some stories and anecdotes, that'll be great as well.
Yeah, well, I really think that leaders are always necessary. But there's a big difference between a leader and a manager. A leader gives direction and facilitates people and makes sure that he creates all the circumstances so people can grow, and become the best version of themselves. And a manager is not always a leader. And the leaders, by the way, are also not always a manager. So these are different roles. But the information age enables us to be on the same information level as all our colleagues, because all information is digital. It is easy to let information travel. So sharing knowledge has never been as easy as it is now. So people are always at the same information level as the manager, unless the manager thinks that he can defend his position by keeping information for himself. But then he'll be the bottleneck, the single point of failure in his own organization. Because if everything has to go through the manager, then he's slowing down his entire team. Like a network and a network infrastructure, if you have single points of failures, bottlenecks, that's always where the risk is. And I think the beauty is, for example, blockchain shows that collective intelligence, where the entire blockchain is at the same level, it's impossible to commit fraud, for example, but it's also a very fast way of securing information and building value, because all people in the blockchain have the same sort of information level. So that's why it's so successful at the moment and so safe for many people. And that also applies to organizations. If people have the same level of information as the leader, as the manager, and you involve them, you trust them to be part of the decision-making process, decisions will be better, will be more on a higher integrity level, because the diversity of people will make sure that decisions are far more balanced in general, and you speed up your organization at some point. First, it feels like it slows down, but if you see all organizations that use this way of making decisions, these are faster and more ready for the exponential world that we are living in than hierarchically controlled organizations. So that's why I think it's very relevant to think about more democratic ways of organizing your company now.
Democratic ways of running teams and running organizations. I work with a lot of students, and I've noticed that millennials typically appreciate that. So I'm curious to know, in your experience, when you work with multi-generational workforce, how does the entire thing of democratizing the workplace, how does one deal with that change? Because there could be people who have seen and lived through hierarchical organizations, and today the world is talking about the future of work being democratic. It says, I mean, we also talk a lot about it, and that's what we prophesy, saying the future of work is all about busting bureaucracy. How does one drive this change in an organization? If there's something that you can talk from your experience, it would be curious to hear.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting question, Harini, and I know you have some experience with this yourself. I think you'll agree with me that the hierarchy is very often more in the heads of the workers than in the heads of the leaders. For leaders, it's easy to say, well, we're going to change the way we work. But then the workers on the work floor have been in patterns for the last 10, 20, 30, or maybe longer years. They think, oh, wait a minute, what's happening now? Is this real? Is this so many is the reorganization, whatever? They will be a bit paranoid sometimes because you can't bring in a new culture, by Monday 12 o'clock. It takes longer, and we really talk about culture change, but also to shake off the patterns that you build up the last 20, 30 years. It's also quite difficult, and making decisions together is something that people are not used to. So you have to facilitate that. So you have to build the culture and change things to make it psychological safe to do so. And that takes time. But there are a few really interesting tricks actually that you can use, which will have an instant change in your organization. And these tricks are totally free, almost totally free, I should say. Because one of them is that, I don't know if I'm the word that I can use a word in India, but we call it the fuck up Friday. We organize fuck up Fridays with the teams. And basically it comes down to that everyone tells his biggest failure of the week at the Friday afternoon drink. We organize a stand-up, everyone has a beer or a drink. And that's why it's not totally free, because you have to pay for the beers. But that's all. So pay for beer, have a drink, and everyone in the stand-up shares his high of the week and his low of the week, his failure of the week. That's why we call it Fuck Up Friday. And if people feel safe to share their mistakes, then you have a psychological safe organization, and you have a learning organization. And you can start with this afternoon. Maybe too late now for you for a Friday afternoon drink, but for me, I'm still on time. But you can start with it this Friday, and just start sharing mistakes and successes. And here, as a leader, you can give the example by sharing your own mistake. And some leaders have difficulties being that vulnerable, but if with all passion you have, you share in a very honest, authentic way your mistake and tell them what you learned from it, or ask feedback, what should we learn from it? Well, that instantly will change the culture. Within weeks, you'll see effect on the work floor. And another thing that we do, that I've also done now in my present organization, because when I entered here 1.5 years ago, it was not particularly safe. Actually, it was a bit an unsafe organization with hierarchy and power gap between the board and the work floor. And I became a director here. And I said to the board, well, guys, why this distance? Shall we change that? Why don't we leave from now on one chair free for every board meeting for someone from the working organization to join us? And we did it, and it was amazing. Instantly, the culture changed, because we had to make the agenda transparent, so people could select the colleague that would join the meeting, based on the agenda. Suddenly, we didn't talk about people anymore, but with people, which is a big difference. We also found out that by making all the information transparent, people said, oh, wait a minute, there are no secrets. Everything is open, what we are discussing. So that felt already very safe. And a real beautiful remark was 3 or 4 months ago from my colleague, Brigitte. She's our communication manager. And she was a bit nervous before the meeting. And after the meeting, I asked, well, Brigitte, how was the meeting? How did you think of it? Well, she said, such a relief. Our board are also doubting about things. I really thought they knew all the solutions, but they also have doubts and are not for sure about the decisions they make. They're just like other human beings. And that's exactly what happens, if you make it psychologically safe. You are humanizing the organization, and closing the power gap will bring people more together. And yeah, I love it. And the beauty is that we did an evaluation after a year, and all the board members said, well, the biggest change for the organization was the free chair in the board meeting. That changed everything. And 3 of my board members have also introduced that in their own organization. One is director of a big bank, and the other is mayor of a town. And, and they all have introduced in their own organization as well. It's really fun.
That's interesting. And out of curiosity, again, when you ask people to talk about the failures of the week, how much time did it really take for people to change and open up? I do get the point that it starts with the leader, because the leader, talks about his failures, makes himself or herself vulnerable. It becomes easy. It's obviously easy, but was it really that easy? Because I had experimented this as well, and I found it very interesting. there was starting trouble. It was unbelievable for people. But did you have that kind of an experience?
Yeah, it is. The example you give as a leader is very important. And there are also rules, that we don't laugh at each other. Of course, you can't prevent that because sometimes it's really funny, a mistake, so then, of course, laugh, but always respect each other. And always combine it with a learning moment. So what do we learn from this mistake? And how can we prevent it? Then you build a learning organization. And actually, this is perhaps the most underestimated way of innovating, because if you can create one improvement per day in your organization, look what you have achieved by the end of the year. And you can't create one improvement per day without sharing knowledge and without sharing mistakes. So it's quite fundamental, actually. But indeed, some people are hesitating. I wouldn't push it too hard. You start, and the first months, ask the volunteers to share their mistake. And there'll always be a few that will do it. And in the end, everybody will do it, because that's how it works. They say, "Oh wow, it's safe, it's fun. I'm not, my head is not being chopped off when I share my mistake." So that's the rule, respect each other. And also, if you are a boss and you heard about the mistake, it's fun to have the meeting on a Friday afternoon, but don't fire the person then on Monday morning. That will be very unsafe. Yeah. So
absolutely. Respecting each other, I think that's the only rule there, and then let it grow naturally. I think that's the secret, because the moment anybody notices that there is a consequence to it, I think the sharing will completely stop. And if we're really talking of people coming forward and sharing their mistakes, they have to be very clear that there is going to be no consequence. The only consequence is learning from each other. So I guess that's the whole point. Respect each other and learn from each other. It's not about finding fault. It's not about holding grudges. It's not about consequences. So I think those rules have to be set very straight. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So in the audience here, we have a lot of entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs, people who are curious about bringing in democratization in their organizations, believers in self-management. So we have a mix of people all curious to hear about what do you think are the challenges that organizations will face as they set forth on their self-management journey as they progress forward. So if you can talk about the challenges, that'll be a big takeaway for everyone.
Yeah, well, I think the main challenge is, and that's actually also what all self-organizing companies say, don't expect that there will be less mistakes made or so, because when people work together, mistakes will be made. So don't expect an ideal picture, that everything will be better, because that's not true. Also, self-organizing companies have problems every now and then. So I want to be very clear on that, because some people think, oh, well, no mistakes anymore. No, of course not. We are people, and people make mistakes, fortunately, because that's why we are people. It is the way we deal with each other. It's the big difference. A disadvantage is that sometimes decisions are slower, because one of the rules that I learned from Ricardo and the team is very interesting, and I think you recognize it. Many people in a meeting are not always capable of saying the right things at that moment in the meeting. Many people wake up the other morning, or when they drive home, they think, oh shit, I should have said that. Why didn't I think of it in the meeting? So they have second thoughts. So very important is that you apply the rule that if you have second thoughts after a day, after 2 days, after 3 days, bring them in, because it will make decisions better. But in some cultures, people with the big mouth basically force the decisions. And if there are sufficient people with a big mouth in a meeting, then the more calm people, the more introvert people won't say anything anymore. Perhaps they have the best, most brilliant idea or solution for you. But if they don't feel safe to bring it in, and they are not allowed to bring it in 2 or 3 days later when they have the second thoughts, then you may make a very bad decision. So always bringing in the contra sounds or the doubts, these sort of things, also from the people that are more quiet, the quiet force in your organization, That's very important, but it feels like time consuming. But in the end, you'll speed up because the decision will be better. It will prevent mistakes in the near future. So it will be a cost saver. And that's a challenge, how to deal with it. Because as assertive people, who are talking out loud like me, they always dominate meetings. So I really have to be very aware that my behavior could block the more calm and quiet people. So I always have to bring in the discipline to listen to them and give them the freedom to come back to make the decision better. And that's one of the challenges I see most in organizations. Yeah. And what I always see is the people, when it starts thinking about self-organization, they want to start changing the structure. And that's also not necessary. First, start working in a new sort of way, then the structure will follow. Because this way of working is a new culture, and culture eats strategy for breakfast, but culture also eats structure for breakfast. So you don't need to change your culture, the structure. First, start working in a new way, and then look at what sort of structure would fit best with your new way of working. That's also one of the things I would recommend.
Yeah, what I hear you say is actually it's resonating with what Ricardo also talks about. Nothing is wrong with organization charts. The problem is when you impose it from the top. So when you force the new, even if it's a new structure, when you force it, it might become challenging. But when you work in the new way, you create a need for the new structure, and then it becomes a lot more acceptable by people. So there's a difference between force and creating a need. I think the magic is all about creating a need. And when you talked about actually dominating meetings, I could resonate with that as well, because I can go on talking to you for hours, but I think we should be.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, and I don't want to demonstrate it to this audience here, so I think we should be fair and allow everyone to have their share of this conversation with you, Arko. So I think let's open it up for more questions. If anybody has questions, let's get started.
Yes, please. Maybe good to say in the meantime, because there are some entrepreneurs in this group, what I found out is that this way of working is the best way for you as an entrepreneur to create a situation where you can work on the business instead of being drawn in the business the entire time. And that's basically how I found out that giving trust to people worked for me. Because in 1995, we were 1 year ahead with our company Euronet, our internet company. I was 26 years old at the time, so long ago. And my partner Simon and I, we were totally tired. We were working over 100 hours per week. And sometimes I see people say, and they tell me, I'm working 100 hours per week, but then I see them in the supermarket on Saturday morning. Well, that's not possible. If you are working 100 hours per week, you can't go to the supermarket on Saturday morning. You may do the calculation. It's a lot, 100 hours. So we were completely exhausted, only working, only eating unhealthy food, and still people in our organization were waiting for us all the time. So we wanted to be involved in every decision, not because we were control freaks, but effectively we were control freaks because we wanted to be involved. But first, it was not like controlling people. We just were so excited about everything that was happening. That's why we wanted to be involved. But the effect was that all people were waiting for Simon and me. So there was frustration in our company. And we were completely exhausted. So we said, well, we can't go on like this. Let's leave the decisions to the people. Yeah, I said, Simon, but maybe they'll make mistakes. Yeah, I said, well, maybe they'll have better ideas than we have. Yeah, of course it's Simon. They have much better ideas. So we said, well, we leave the decisions to our people. And we agreed on one thing. We won't whine or complain when people would make mistakes. We would help them when they would make a mistake. Well, later, many, many years later, I learned that actually is how you create psychological safety. Because it's the difference between controlling people and being in control. And this was being in control without controlling people because it was based on trust. And the story didn't end here because...
Can we have your favorite demonstration of this, being in control?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
That's a famous one. We don't want this audience to miss that.
Yeah, the thing I'm now on my phone doing this call because it didn't work on my iPad. I do it with my headset. This my iPhone, my earpads box. Well, for many people, if you lose control, it feels like this, that it falls and it breaks. But this also letting things go. It's also losing control. Building a support system. I don't hold it, but I still support it. It's completely free. It can move, but building a support system for your people, that's basically what we did by helping people when they make a mistake. So this is with this I'll summarize the entire Semco style, because this is what you do. You support each other. And yeah, the result was that a few months later, was in the summer of 1995, we were about to have the Dutch National Bank as a customer. I'm not sure whether I told you this story, Irene. It's quite cool, actually, because the Dutch National Bank, that was an amazing customer to have for a 1.5-year-old company that we were. So they were coming in, at 9 o'clock in the morning, on Monday, the director was coming in for a meeting. And before the meeting, we said, well, I won't make the decision yet because I have to go back to my boards and blah, blah, blah. So a meeting with no decision. That was what we expected on a Monday morning. But there was one guy called Pete Mulder, and he was the project leader of this program. And Pete felt more safe and more himself in the organization since Simon and I changed the culture. And he really had the idea that he could really do all the things that he loves in the company. And one of the things he always dreamed of was having blue hair. And not a little bit blue, but really, really, really cobalt blue hair, and that morning he decided to have his blue hair. So Pete walked in with his big blue hair. And John, our financial director, who was also involved in the project, he went completely pale. So, oh, wait a minute. And can we call off the Dutch National Bank? No, we couldn't call him off. He was on his way already. Oh, he said, now we lose the customer because they will never buy from a guy with blue hair. But Pete was the only one who could do the presentation. So we were a bit nervous because of the anger reaction of John. And Pete was also a bit nervous. But we started the meeting, and Pete started answering the question, doing his presentation, felt more confident. And after 20 minutes, the director of the Dutch National Bank said, well, I think I know enough by now. Where can I sign? What do you mean? We said, well, where can I sign? Is there a contract? Yes, but you said that you would go back to your board. You wouldn't make a decision yet. Yeah, he said, I changed my mind. Well, why? Well, he said, I came here now I've been here for a couple of weeks now, for a couple of months. And I saw you guys doing the things you do, and you answer all the questions, and it was all okay, but there was something not right. And it was all the suits. But now I see Pete's blue hair. I'm convinced that my assignment is here in the right hands, because now I believe you're a true internet company. So this is for me the result of this. If you facilitate people, you support them, and they can be the best version of themselves, no dress code is needed, because then they have self-confidence, and there's no better dress code than self-confidence. So if people can really feel that they are free to become the best version of themselves in an organization, you can beat everyone with them. It's amazing what happens. So it happened in 1995. Well, it was so it's a long time ago. I was 26 years old. And for me, this is the example of what happens when you build a support system in your organization.
Wonderful. No better dress code than self-confidence. I think that's a great one-liner. Thanks, Arko. And Devi has raised his hand. Devi, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, sir. And again, fantastic conversation, Arko. And some of those examples are something that somebody will remember for life, right? So great example.
Thank you.
I loved it.
Thank you.
Arko, one question that came to my mind is, in an organization, people are your biggest asset. And they fortunately, unfortunately, come in all shapes, sizes, color, behaviors, expectations, goals in life. Mm-hmm. Now, what are some of the common barriers you have seen when you're trying to build a self-managed organization with all the intent, right? As a leader, you probably learned it, trying to implement it. But what are some of the common barriers you have seen in implementing? Because like I said, you can't really expect everybody to behave in a certain way, even if you feel it is the right thing to do. In your experience, what are the common barriers that you have seen and you have to work around it to make it happen?
Yeah, well, it's a very nice question, actually, because it will change perhaps. Because as a director or an owner of the company, you could think, well, these are the common values. But as soon as you start involving people in decision-making, it may be that there will slight changes in the values or in the things that are really important. Also, you know, that's what I see go wrong with many entrepreneurs. They really love self-organization, but in their heart, they want self-organization to be done in their way. But as soon as you leave it to other people, they will do it their way, because that's the whole concept of self-organization. And it also applies to values. It may be that there are slight changes in the values, that most often the values get stronger. So the integrity level will go higher. What we've seen in a company where I'm shareholder in, it's called Infocaster in a city called Arnhem in the Netherlands. The director his name is Sander, and he decided when he met Ricardo now 8 years ago that he would never make a decision anymore. That was his last decision. So from that moment, he left all decisions to his people. And then he saw that people would do things differently. At first, he felt nervous, but that is what happens. And one of the things that happened is quite beautiful, actually. They had faced an almost bankruptcy 2 years before. And all the people said, oh, we never want to be in that situation anymore. But from that moment, they were allowed to make their own decisions, also financial decisions. They could even decide on their own salary from that moment. And Sander was worried that they would start paying themselves more money, but that didn't happen, because the first thing they took care of was the financial health of the company. So what they decided was that they would never go bankrupt anymore. And they said, well, you know, but how could we decide not to go bankrupt? Well, then we need enough money on the bank. Okay, then the next question is, when is it enough money? They didn't know. They said, well, said someone, what was the longest period in time that we were without new customers? Well, they looked into the books and they said, well, 2 years ago, it was 4.5 months without new customers. Okay, that's the longest in our entire existence. Yeah, it's the longest in our entire existence. Okay, then we take it safe. Then we say, well, our drop dead ratio is that we want to have always enough money on the bank to be half a year, 6 months without new customers. So that was the new rule. That's the drop dead ratio. And from that moment on, they always had money in the bank. From that moment, they never had any financial problems anymore. And from the moment there was money for 6 months, for half a year on the bank, then they started hiring new people, raising salaries, doing other sort of things. What does it have to do with the values? Well, one of the values was that Sander, as a director, sometimes paid himself more and then he paid less. No, he was in the same stream as all the rest of the people. And he could think about more salary for himself from the moment there was sufficient in the bank for half a year. He didn't have control about that anymore. But his company has never been this healthy. And now they are so cash rich that they've, it's crazy. It's one big success from that moment. But the value is that they take care of the company first and then for the individuals. And the leader is one of the individuals. So it was impossible for him to take care of himself first and then for the rest of the organization. He was in the same league as the rest of the people. And that was something to get used to for him. Is that an answer to your question?
Absolutely. I think nothing better than having an example to fall back on. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Before we come to you, Rajesh, I saw that you just raised your hand. Aslam has a question. Aslam would like to unmute and ask.
Yes.
Aslam, over to you.
Yes, thanks, Arko. One wonderful interaction.
Thank you.
So when we're creating self-organized teams, and let's for example, you would have a chance to probably set up a new team versus you're working with an existing team. What are the different approaches would you use in either of those cases?
Yeah, well, it's obviously much easier to do this with a new team than with an existing team. So I have to be very honest with that. So yes, it's easier. And I also want to make one other contribution to that. It's also easier for an entrepreneur than for a leader in a big company that you don't own. And we've seen that with some customers. I think Rajesh, Emil and Harini know that we have been working with ABN AMRO, one of our biggest banks in the Netherlands. And there we had to help them to bring a team of 3,500 people of the personal banking department to self-organization. And I know these numbers are not that big in India, but in Holland, this is a big company, I can tell you. We're a small country. And 3,500 people is a lot. And they took out 200 managers and replaced them, or didn't replace them, and 70 team coaches and 30 still skill coaches were in place of the managers to facilitate the teams. We found out that the management team, the board of this department, was under tremendous pressure of the shareholders, of the Dutch National Bank, the authority for the financial markets, because banks are being controlled deeply by these governmental organizations, same as in India, I guess. And the pressure they felt when they went into this direction in a totally control-based environment was tremendous. The leadership that the director Klaas had to show was so difficult because, of course, after a few months, a few things went wrong. And you could impossibly blame that to self-organization because things always go wrong in banks and other organizations. People make mistakes. But of course, his board would say, well, Klaas, you see, that's because of the self-organization. And then keeping your course, you know, keep staying straight in what you started, keeping the culture alive, making sure that the criticism doesn't reach the organization, but holding them back. That was so tremendously powerful what they did. And then I realized that it's more difficult for a manager type leader in an organization than for an entrepreneur. But for an entrepreneur, because for an entrepreneur, it's your own company. You know, it's completely different.
Sure. Thanks, Arko. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Is that an answer to your question?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Over to you, Rajesh.
Yeah, thanks, Harini. Arko, you made a reference to Bitcoin earlier in the conversation. It was fascinating for me. Now we've all been talking about, you explained to us about pitfalls in self-management. Do you think that when the evolution of the internet, Bitcoin, etc., does that have an influence on this whole self-management concept? I started my career 3 decades ago. I didn't hear of this term then. Is it becoming more relevant now? What's driving this need for self-management?
Yeah, to be honest, my opinion on Bitcoin is that it's being used by many people for the wrong reasons, perhaps, because most people see it as an investment opportunity, while I see blockchain as a very powerful model to change perhaps economical models, to make it more democratic. But the reasons why people invest in it are very old school at the moment. So I think basically we don't use blockchain the right way at the moment. That's my opinion about it. And even if there are people with the right intention, then still other people want to make money with it. And it's a bit difficult. But this way of working, I call it the internet way, yeah, that's definitely a way of working that more organizations should adopt, because the power of collective intelligence is amazing. Let's take an example of ABN AMRO again, because I mentioned that. We see it also in other organizations. If 3,500 people start thinking about, well, how can we make the happiness on the work floor better? Well, you can be very, very sure if 3,500 people start thinking about happiness, everyone will be more happy. If they think about, well, how can we increase the net promoter score, or the customer satisfaction? If 3,000 people start thinking about customer satisfaction, it will go up. As simple as that, because that's how it works. And that's the power of collective intelligence. So if people have the same sort of information as the leaders, and they are part of the team that can think of the solutions and make the decisions together, decisions will be better. And that's what it is. And it will be more safe, psychological safe, because, you know, if people feel that they can contribute, they feel appreciated, you know, and valued, and it's better for the psychology of people. But it will also be more safe in terms of preventing fraud, because fraud is always in a place where one person on a quiet place, the organization has all the information. He's then the single point of failure, the bottleneck. But if people have all the same information, it's almost impossible to commit fraud in an organization, because someone will see it. So you make it safe and more on a higher integrity level, by all means, actually, in an organization, when you use collective intelligence. And whether that's with 20 people or with 2,000 people, that does not really matter. Is that an answer to your question, or did you mean something else, Rajesh?
No, thanks for clarifying. Actually, I used the term Bitcoin wrongly. I referred, you know, I was going to say blockchain, and thanks for correcting that and answering. And Arko, so sometime back you also mentioned about in the earlier era, managers were, where the managers had access to information, and as a result of which they were better positioned to take decisions. And with the internet, with the information era, that no longer is the case. Does that have anything to do with the the transition into self-management and why it's becoming so relevant now?
Yeah, definitely. That's actually the reason I was excited about the Semco style long ago already, because before I knew about Ricardo, actually, it was I had a training institute called .edu. We saw that I think in 2000 or so, and I saw when we were doing these trainings for ING Bank and KPN and all these big companies here, and the government, that leaders had great difficulties implementing online marketing and implementing the internet, because the internet, what many people don't realize, to make the internet work, trust has been built in the internet protocol on peer-to-peer level. Now, if you and I just send each other an email, our computers in a split second say to each other, well, we trust each other. And the reason is actually not so idealistic as you would think, because the Ministry of Defense has developed the internet. And that was in the period of the Cold War. So they want to design a communication infrastructure which would not be vulnerable for nuclear disasters or other sort of things. So if you build a pyramid-shaped network, you chop off the head, the rest of the network wouldn't function. But this flat type of network, if you chop up half of it, the other half will keep on functioning. That's how the internet's been built. And the only way to do it was to build trust, make the connection protocol on peer-to-peer level, so on the deepest level of the network. That's why the internet is flat, doesn't have owners, no one is the boss over the internet, there's no hierarchy. It's a flat type of network. And the reason is security. So that's very interesting. So if you now look at organizations that wanted to adopt the internet, these were all hierarchical, and they were all always thinking even in hierarchies. And that blocked actually the people that would want to make speed with the internet, because all decision-making processes combined with new technologies create very expensive organizations. And that's what we noticed. So then I wrote a book, because I found out that the internet was based on trust, that on peer-to-peer level, it was based on transparency. The scientists use it to collaborate, to share knowledge. These were very important cultural elements, and most organizations couldn't deal with that culture. They were not good in trust, and they would not be good in cooperating with other people and sharing knowledge. So then I decided to write a book. It was called New Heroes, because I said, well, a new sort of guts is needed. They need to share, they need to give trust to people. And then I written a book, and then someone gave me the book of Ricardo. He said, well, Arko, you write a nice book about it, but this gentleman has been doing that for many years already. And so I was introduced first to Ricardo's way of thinking. But for me, this is completely connected to the digital world, because that's the world that I come from. And to bring in speed in your organizations, the only way to do it is by bringing in trust in your organization, the speed of trust. And I think someone has written a book about that as well once.
Yeah.
It's totally connected. So if you want to make speed and you want to boost your innovation, you want to have a culture of continuous improvement, the only way is involving your people and speeding them up by giving them the same information as you have, giving the freedom, the trust, and the responsibility to take ownership over it. And yes, sometimes something will go wrong, but it will be completely overcompensated by everything that will go faster and better.
It's fascinating, Arko. So yeah, you know, a key message I take away from this is, if the internet had been hierarchical, it wouldn't have grown this fast. And that's fascinating. And the speed of trust, if organizations are looking at responding to situations quickly, speed then becomes the essence. But I reflect back on my career, and I think back and see how we end up building policies based on suspicion, not on trust, right?
Yeah, that's weird. And it's also logical in a way, because if you see how we've been evaluating, or now how the evolution worked actually for people. You know, when we were still 5,000 years ago, we were still hunters. Our suspicious mind was necessary to survive. You know, you would see half in the dark something weird on your path. The first thing your brain does think, oh, it's a snake. But maybe it's a piece of wood. But the fact that it first thinks it's a snake gives you just a second to respond. And that's also a matter of safety. So our security system that's built in our body is a bit suspicious. That's how we survived for thousands of years in the jungle. And now we need something else. And that's because there are not many snakes and other dangerous species in Bangalore, I guess. Or maybe there are. But you know, I think the dangers are now different, and the risks than at that time, and we still react like the tribesmen of 5,000 years ago. Our brain, so it's logical, but we have to learn new patterns. And now the way to be agile is to build trust in your organization. So that it's a bit contra-intuitive. Yeah.
The game has changed and the rules have changed.
Yeah, but we haven't. You know, yeah, it looks like we have, but we haven't. You know, we wear perhaps nicer clothes, and we live in houses, and we drive cars, but we are not that different from the tribesmen from 5,000 years ago. No.
Thank you so much. And Vandana has raised her hand. Vandana, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, I hope I can hold this through. Arko, my question is, I think, connected to what you just said. To some extent, when we work with companies, we find many of them are still very scared about how long the change would take. Should they get in, you know, what impact it will have on some of the middle level management and things like that. So my question was more, do you have any, and a couple of responses to this you have already given, but do you have any recommendation in terms of what they could start with, see some benefits to their business, and then move on to taking it in a big way?
It depends on how you organize it. The whole change process will take, I hear some noise on the background. The whole process will take perhaps forever, because it will never stop. Because you will never stop changing as soon as you have self-organization in your company, and people always keep on improving. So it will never be finished, and that's logical because our environment is also changing. So that's completely logical. So we become part of a changing ecosystem. So it will never stop. That's one. The second, how do you get started? Well, dream big, but start slowly. That's what I would say. Because if you think you could change the entire company in a very short period of time with self-organization, well, that's a mistake, because people will start bringing in improvements in the organization, but that will take time. And you may have a vision on how the company should run, but your people perhaps have a different sort of vision. So they won't change your entire company. What I would recommend is to pick up a certain topic to start with. What Infocaster did, as I told you earlier, that the last decision was no decision anymore. That won't work in a large organization. So with ABN AMRO, they decided to pick up a few topics that are important. And one of them was the Net Promoter Score. The other one was the revenue. And the third one was the employee happiness. And they started focusing on these three things in the changing process. And they saw results on both three topics within 6 months. So that's how fast it can go. And not that it was dramatically better. It's not that they were twice as happy, the customers, but it was significantly better. So 1 or 2% improvement on all these elements. But if you have every 6 months, 1 or 2% improvements, look where you are in 5 years' time. It's crazy. So start small, pick up something really concrete that everyone can align with, and use the collective intelligence of your people to think about these topics. That's the fastest way to do it. And start also with these little things like what I said, the one chair free or board meeting, the fuck up Friday thing, share your mistakes on Friday afternoon with a drink. A very nice one is also that you as a leader don't host the meetings anymore. They have a scheme that, a relating scheme of chairing meetings, that everyone can be chairman of the meeting every now and then. It also gives ownership to your organization. So these sort of little things are totally free. You don't have to change the structure, but you will change the culture by that.
Thanks, Arko.
Sorry, Arko, I had to ask a follow-up question on that. So we spoke about no need to change the org structure, etc. The audience today here, there are a lot of entrepreneurs who are on the verge of scaling up. Now, as you start scaling up, are there things that one needs to avoid? Are there right ways to scale up? You said scale smartly, right? So how would you recommend when somebody is building an organization? What are the things one needs to, watch out for?
Yeah, well, if you build an organization, not every organization is built to scale. Scaling has to fit your type of business. For example, my training institute, we could have found many more customers perhaps, but we didn't have the teachers. So we couldn't scale faster than we could find teachers at the time. So that limited our scalability. And now we are living in an online world. Now it's much easier to scale. So first look at the scalability options for your organization and what that would ask of you. And it does not have anything to do with Semco style, but pure with the nature of your business. But then, if you are a leader, you will face a few episodes in your existence. And after a year or when you reach the point of 15 employees, most organizations enter the management phase. And a traditional solution would be that you would hire a manager at that moment, so you can do other things as a leader. But even when you have a manager on the payroll, the big problems still end up at your plate as a leader. So far better is, as soon as you have some employees on board, and I think the moment to start thinking about it is when you have 5 or 7 people on board, that really becomes a team. Then start thinking, guys, if we start growing and we want to do that with not too many managers, we want to be more agile, what shall we do? How shall we build it? What sort of new people should we bring in? If you start involving your people from that moment in every important decision, that's the best way to build a self-managed organization. If you define clear roles between you as a leader and the people in your team, and stick to these roles and add people when the problem shows up, well, that's the way of building a self-organized company. You can really build it without too many managers if you involve your people on the right moment. And I think that moment for a startup is at 5 or 7 employees to start thinking about this. Earlier is pointless and later is already too late. For bigger organizations, it's more difficult. What we found out is the leadership is crucial. So if the leaders want to make the change, it will happen. But however, the Semco style is a bottom-based leadership style. Without sponsorship from the leaders, it won't happen. So it will never be bottom-based without leaders that love it. So your leadership is crucial. And if you as a leader can facilitate it, it will happen. But then make sure that you also accept the consequences, because there's no way back. If you start doing this and at some point people want to do perhaps different thing you wanted as a leader, you can't pull back, because people will leave. They will never go back to the old hierarchical situation anymore. So if you start with it, there's no return. As simple as that. And accept then that things will go differently than you thought.
Yeah.
Accept that people have other solutions than you had in mind, and be part of that process. It's really losing control, and it will feel uncomfortable every now and then. But in the end, you speed up the process, you speed up your company, happiness will go up, sickness leave will go down, revenue will go up, results will be better. You won't go bankrupt that easy anymore. Lots of advantages, but it will feel uncomfortable for leaders every now and then, always.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it requires a lot of courage and commitment, right? So yeah. It can be uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's brave leadership. Certainly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I was actually eagerly waiting for is coming from Rahul, and I'll be happy if Rahul would unmute and ask that question himself. I'm just curious to hear that answer from you, Arko.
Yeah.
Thanks, Arnie. Yeah. So, Arko, you mentioned, in the previous example that you mentioned, there were 3 metrics that they were tracking. One was NPS, another one was something, and the third one was employee happiness. And you mentioned that, within 6 months you saw great progress on all three measures. Very curious to understand how you tracked employee happiness.
Yeah, ABN AMRO had a system for that already. They had it in place for many years already. So they measured it themselves. So that's a few things. And one of the elements was sickness leaves and some other things, but also general happiness, satisfaction. I don't know exactly how they measured that, but it was a figure that they could give about how they appreciated the organization. And I think it was split up in a few numbers, about the role, about the management, but little things that they could rate. Yeah, but it went up. I think it went from just below 7 on the scale from 0 to 10 to just above 7 in that first half year. Yeah, and the sickness leaves actually went down, and that was also quite significant. Yeah, I've seen it also happen.
That's interesting, and I was really waiting to hear that from you, Arko, because many a time measuring happiness is bound to be equal. And I mean, people measure the moods of people in the day and say that's what happiness is. But it's a lot more than that. And you absolutely brought out the sickness days, absenteeism. All of these are ways you measure happiness. People are happy and they would actually come back to work. So that's where we correlate happiness and high productivity. And I was actually waiting for that answer. And thank you so much.
Well, I had the same experience when I was CEO of the BAK, which is a big leadership institute here in the Netherlands. It was the first time I was running a company that I didn't own. I never had done it before. I always part of the shareholders somehow, until now. Now also doing a non-profit organization. But at the BAK, it is quite a prestigious institute here in the Netherlands. It's one of the top leadership schools. And funny enough, there was quite a sick culture actually. It was unsafe. We had 9% sickness leave, 9%. So 1 out of 11 was sick home. Crazy, I think. And we needed a new strategy. There was financially, there were problems. Actually, I doubted if I should give back the assignment after 3 months, because it was in a state that they didn't tell me when I started. So it was a complete rescue operation, rescue the BAK, basically. After 3 months, I had an employee meeting, and all employees were there. And I said, well, I should put a dot on the horizon, set the new structure, the new strategy. And I was a bit nervous because being a leader in an organization where everyone in the organization knows everything about leadership. These were all leadership specialists. That was really difficult, to be honest. It was perhaps one of the most challenging moments in my life, I think. Even I felt really insecure, and I'm normally not very insecure, but then I felt really insecure. And my reaction was that, well, I should set a strategy. And I made a big mistake, because it's also a professional organization, and I should not have said, well, this is the dot on the horizon. I should have facilitated that they would come up with the dot on the horizon. And they told me. Well, from that moment, of course, I listened to all the people and said, well, you know, you're totally right. We should have done it differently. Well, how shall we do it? And then they came with solutions, and there were a working group, and people were working on the dot on the horizon. The funny thing is that within 2 months, the sickness leaves went down from over 9% to under 5%. Because people said, hey, wait a minute. People are listening to me. I can give my opinion. I can be part of the change. I can be part of the future. Suddenly my voice is being heard. So just by involving the people in the vision, in the mission, and the dot on the horizon, made the sickness leaves go down. So it's crazy. I never would have expected that result at that moment. And later we found out that also involving people in the strategy, they came up with a brilliant idea, because the customer satisfaction went up by something that was completely free for us to organize. It was just a little bit of work. We didn't have to invest €1 to do it. Our hospitality team, we gave them from that moment a desk from 8 to 10 in the morning at training locations. And it was all on our own premises. From that moment, because all these hospitality people were there suddenly sitting at the place where all the customers would come in, they had a better relation with the customer, they had a better relation with the trainer, they could solve problems on the spot when a beamer was not working, or there were not sufficient chairs, or something else was wrong, the food was not there, or suddenly there was a closer working relation between our hospitality team, the customers, and the trainers. And that resulted in 3 months' time in a customer satisfaction, which went up from 82% to 97.6%. We were suddenly the most customer-friendly training institute in the Netherlands. And just by doing this. So it's amazing what happens when you involve people in the solution, because this came from the hospitality team. And the only reason they wanted it is because that they would have more physical contact with the real customers, because they only saw the customers per email or on the phone. And now they met the customers in real life. It was for their fun. And as a result of that, the customer satisfaction went up from over 80 to 97.6%. Crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. They say the best ideas come from the edges of the organization, right? To people who are actually interacting with the product or the customers.
Yeah, yeah.
We have another.
Sorry, I had to cough.
No problem. We have another 12 minutes to go, and I think Subbu raised his hand. Subbu, would you like to go next? And
yeah, sure. Thanks, thanks, Arnie. Hey, Arko, how are you?
Hey, Subbu, I see you. I didn't see you in the crowd.
Yeah, I've been enjoying your, speech and interaction for the last hour. So thank you so much. I had one question. Yeah, I had one question which was kind of extending what Rajesh asked a little bit earlier, right? It's about the scaling up of the organization, right? So, I mean, if you step back a little bit, and I'm seeing, organizations as they grow, over a period of time, they do a lot of crazy things to keep the growth going, right? I mean, they get into adjoining areas, they acquire companies, they do things, they just grow in size. Now, in this new way of working that we have been talking about, are the days of these large companies behind us? I mean, will we ever see a large company again of the kind of, say, General Electric, which went into a meltdown, which is no longer there, or more or less gone, right? And IBM just see that half the company has been separated out into a new company. So now companies are resizing, or whatever, smart sizing as they call it. So do you see the large companies, behind us? There's the age of the dinosaur for them. We are going to see only small companies which are very focused on what they do and kind of collaborating with each other? How do you see this going?
Yeah, good one. Normally everything, but extinction always starts with something becomes really big and then suddenly it disappears, like the dinosaurs, as you said.
Yeah.
So that would plead for the fact that they won't survive. On the other hand, if you build a big organization and split it up in smaller teams, why would it not function? You know, society also functions and it's also growing. So I don't think that necessarily big companies should always disappear, but I think they should organize more wisely. And that's what I also see happening. In the Netherlands, however, our biggest companies have lost the last 20 years over 70% of their employees. Must say that our demographic situation is completely different than India, because we are a really aging society. You have still a very young society, which is a big difference, I think. Also for COVID-19, by the way, but that's a different story. So we need to do the work with less people. In Japan, we see the same. You know, that's the population is shrinking, so you need to do the same work with less people. So that's a real demographic need to change the way you work, and that's also here. So for that reason, I see in our sort of societies, companies get smaller. But I'm convinced that if you have a real big organization and you split it up in smaller teams, it could happily work, you know, it could function like a society. So I don't like these big companies, and put it like that, because I think it's not for everyone healthy. But I see it also as a big challenge to keep them healthy, you know, and to make them healthy, because it's in the internet also a rule that the winner takes it all. So online companies that are the winners can only keep on growing, and that's also the nature of their business. So yeah, I'm a bit double in it, Subbu. I prefer to work in smaller teams, and many people do. And if we split a big company into smaller teams, they can be just as agile as a small company. I'm convinced.
Yeah.
But it depends on the leaders.
Yeah, I think only governments seem to be perpetually expanding.
Sorry, what did you say?
I think world over, only governments are expanding perpetually on taxpayer money.
Yeah. There's a long way to go still.
Yeah.
in many ways. Yeah. By the way, for the people in the audience, with Subbu, it all started with Semcostal India. So that's why I'm so glad that you are there. I didn't see you, otherwise we would have said hello already. I think you were the first who contacted us, and then we jumped on the plane to India. So that's how it all started. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So thanks for that still, Subbu.
Yeah, so happy
vision that really, really nice.
What an awesome journey it has been. And just a quick time check. We're almost 8 minutes to wrap up. In case there are any more questions, you can still take one. But otherwise, I'm sure, Arko, you've already gathered a fan following after listening to you today. I'm sure a lot of people here are going to get in touch with you and stay in touch with you. So no surprises on that. And thank you so much for being with us today on this Cosmic Friday. It has been absolutely a pleasure listening to you as always.
Yeah, but it's really nice to be here and so see all the friends from India again. So nice, the whole team is there. So thank you for that. Now, for me, it's very important to be honest about self-organization. We have a company here in the Netherlands. It's called Niverplast, and they build shrink wrap machines for basically for bread. So they shrink wrap bread and sandwiches and croissant and all these things, you know. And it's a company that started nearly 40 years ago by a gentleman called Gerrit-Jan Nieuwenhuis. It's a very Dutch name. And Gerrit-Jan is very religious, and he wants to be a good man in life, and he takes that assignment very serious. I like that, actually. And he wants to have the most safe sort of company, the most secure company for people. And he found out that any sort of violence is bad for people. And he sees violence very broadly. He's saying, well, putting pressure, putting targets on people, putting fixed working times. He sees that all as violence. He wants the most unviolent company in the world. So there is no pressure whatsoever on people. The only fixed moment in their company is 12:30 lunch, and it's not an obligation, but they have a chef who is making such nice food with such beautiful fresh ingredients that the smell attracts people to the restaurant about 12:20 already, and everyone is on time to be there for the fresh food. That's the only moment which is really fixed in the organization. The organization has been growing for 40 years now. It's now in 67 countries. It has never stopped growing. 4 or 5 years ago, they entered a new sort of building, and they thought they would last with the building for many years, but it's now too small already. They've grown out of it already. But the beauty is, the building is completely a circle. So it's like finding a UFO in the field when you enter that building. It's built from wood, so it's also circular in a sort of from a climate point of view, but it's also literally a circle. And I want to ask you, Rajesh, maybe you know it. Why do you think the building is a circle?
I have no clue, Arko.
It's the most beautiful self-managing reason you could think of, because they were thinking with each other about how can we make the distance from the office to the work floor as short as possible. The only way is to build the office in the middle and build the rest of the factory as a circle around it. And we did 2 years ago Semcostel Safari with some people from Japan and a few from Germany and from Portugal. Also someone from India and a few people from Iraq. We had a customer in Iraq, in Baghdad of all places. And they were there. And I think the best way to describe how completely inspiring this company is, Yusuke, our partner in Japan, brought his little boy, his son, a little boy, 5 years old, little Japanese kid. And he was walking there and he said, I want to work here. And now, 2 years later, if he draws his ideal sort of company, he draws a circle, and that's where he wants to work. Well, it's amazing. It really is amazing. Beautiful. And the only thing that he is doing as a leader, Gerrit-Jan, is keeping the culture alive. And very interesting is that he found out that he doesn't want to have hierarchy because he thinks that really is bad for the organization. But suddenly there was a new sort of hierarchy. There are no managers, simply they are not there. But the people who worked the longest there were suddenly more important than the newcomers. Hey, wait a minute, said Gert-Jan, that's not what I want. So then he decided first to involve the newcomers in his Friday afternoon pizza meetings to think about the future. So by giving that example, by inviting the newcomers for his innovation meetings and leaving the old people out, he said, hey guys, no hierarchy, also newcomers are important. We also want to listen to them. So he's setting examples every now and then to make sure that the culture stays alive. And don't create new hierarchies in this company because there should be no hierarchy. Having said that, Gerrit-Jan says, well, I said, well, what do you think about it? Oh, I love my company, really proud, everybody's happy. And I asked, are there no disadvantages? Yes, of course, he said. Because sometimes I just want to make a decision and say, well, this is the way we're going to do it. But I can't. It's impossible. But sometimes I really want to do it, that they do it my way. Sometimes, and then it takes 3-4 weeks before they see that I really did have the best idea. But when they find out, it's their idea. But then I lost 3-4 weeks. But then we speed up, and then I realized that the alternative is always worse. He said, and then I do something else. I go on vacation, or I do go fishing, and I just step out of my company. I don't get annoyed because I know that this is still the very best alternative. But the disadvantage is that sometimes I'm annoyed and I want to speed up things. And that's the honest story about self-organization. It's better than all the alternatives, and sometimes it's also a bit annoying. But all of the leaders that I know and that I've spoken with, and these are hundreds by now, they all say the same. The alternative is always less attractive than this, unless that there are always a few disadvantages. That's the best way to summarize it.
Awesome.
Fascinating, Arko. Fascinating.
And before we wrap it up, finally, Rajesh, just wanted to request everyone to turn on their videos for a moment while we take a nap. And then back to you, Rajesh.
Yeah. If you had told me earlier, I'd have put on some lipstick and come, Arnie. It's okay. Right.
Yeah, we like you like this.
Thank you so much, Arko. So many takeaways from this conversation for me. Central to that was how you said it's important to build trust in the organization, because that's going to determine the speed of your organization. And and I love the example illustration of being in control and not controlling, with the simple example you showed. It resonates so beautifully. There are multiple ways to, thank you so much for that. I'm sure we'll follow, but there is one thing which you said that I'm not going to be able to follow. You said how your colleague painted his hair blue and came to office, something which I don't think I can try that.
No. Maybe you could put on a whip or so, Rajesh. I think it would be really awesome, if you do that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Arko. Wonderful having you here.
Yeah,
thanks
you for having me. And any questions, just let me know. I think you all have my, at least the team of Semcostal India will have my email address and my contact details. So don't worry. And if I would love to join you again at some point, and I hope to see you in real life again once, because that's after COVID-19 and we are allowed to travel again. We should definitely meet up.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
We'd love to host you here, Arko.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love to come over. So, but you also very welcome in my country. So let's organize it.
Absolutely.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend and enjoy self-organization and keep the inspiration high. I would say it's worthwhile.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Bye. Thanks, Arko.
All right.
Thanks,
Take care.
Harini.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Oh, bye.